So we're making this video kind of as a follow-up to yesterday's trade deadline festivities. Now, if you know me well enough, you know that I'm a Vancouver Canucks fan, and that when it comes to my favorite team, the Canucks, pulling off the big trade deadline moves to put them over the edge, signing Phil Kessel, and doing everything that the fan base thought they would do, they ended up not doing any of that, and they stood pat. They literally didn't do anything during the trade deadline day, aside from make a few press conferences afterwards. So when it comes to the team itself and why everything went down the way it was, hey, we had our conversations yesterday. We said, yeah, the Canucks, they were trying to go all in with the Lindholm trade. You don't think you're going to be able to re-sign him. Is it really worth it to go into a deadline and not go all in, not trade away your prospects like Willander and Karamaki and all these guys? And we talked about how Alvin wanted to stay with them. It was a big deal, pretty much. But today, after reading this article by Patrick Johnston on The Province, I think we kind of know why everything didn't go the way we thought it would. So, I'll leave a link in the description to this article, as we had said, published by PJ on The Province. The Canucks have tried to trade Tucker Poolman's contract. Tucker Poolman hasn't played a game for the Canucks since early 22-23 and is under contract till 2026. This article was published yesterday, and it reveals some very interesting information as to why the Canucks could not make any deals. We talked about this yesterday. Tyler Toffoli went for a second and a third. How could the Canucks not have matched that? They didn't want to trade away Willander, Karamaki, Podkolzin, Hoglander, anybody like that. They didn't want to trade away their first-round pick. Toffoli cost a second and a third. Why did they not do that? Well, here's why. Tucker Poolman is a Vancouver Canucks defenseman who has been on the LTIR for a while now. His contract is $2.5 million a year, and it goes on till the end of 2024-2025. Poolman isn't really an asset for Vancouver at this point. He never was, to be honest. I mean, he had 40 games played in 2021, 2022, but then he got hit with COVID and other injuries, and everything slowed him down, and he had 3 points in 40 games, and then 1 point in the 3 games last year, and that was it. He did not do anything with this team, but his IR contract is a big deal, because if you go over to this article published by PJ, he writes this: Patrick Allvin did carve out some cap clearance over the course of this season, but in the end, it's obvious that the cap limited him from taking some big swings this week ahead of the trade deadline. The reason the Canucks salary cap is making use of long-term IR is now down to a very simple issue: Tucker Poolman. The veteran defenseman was signed ahead of the 2021-2022 season by Jim Benning to a 4-year deal, but since January 2022, Poolman has barely played because of concussion-related and migraine-related issues. Here's the kicker immediately after. Instead, his contract has sat on the Canucks' books, taking up salary cap space. Because he's injured and he's unlikely to ever play again, his contract can be placed on LTIR, which allows teams to get salary cap relief and exceed the cap limit if needed. But doing so means that teams can't accrue cap space over the course of the season if they manage to be below the limit at any given day. That's something that Alvin nodded at during his press conference on Friday following the NHL trade deadline. Asked by Post Media at the press conference if he explored trading Poolman's contract, the GM answered very simply, yes. Now, if you don't know what that means exactly, let's go over the rules of the salary cap one more time just to illuminate what Tucker Poolman's $2.5 million actually does to the Canucks and their plans. Of course, $2.5 million isn't the biggest contract in the world, but it's certainly something, and especially in a flat cap system like the NHL has, you try to use every dollar that you can, right? What this contract does is it forces the Vancouver Canucks to always be at the cap ceiling. The reason for that is because once you're at the cap ceiling, you're allowed to use LTIR cap room to go beyond that ceiling and maneuver around with whatever dollar amount you put on the LTIR. In this case, Poolman is making $2.5 million a year, meaning that once the Vancouver Canucks reach the salary cap limit, they have $2.5 million of overage they're allowed to use. The problem with this is if the Vancouver Canucks are not at the cap ceiling, if they're, let's say, $5 million underneath the cap, they're $6 million under the cap. That's hard to do, by the way, but let's say hypothetically they are. if they're below the cap by anything over $2.5 million, then all of a sudden Tucker Poolman's contract is not LTIR-able. You can't put it on the LTIR because you're not at that limit yet. You can only use LTIR reserve space if you're at the salary cap limit. So the Canucks are in this weird crossroads where they can't decommit more money on their team because Poolman's contract would come back onto the books, but they can't go too high over it because Poolman's contract is only $2.5 mil. So it works both ways against the Vancouver Canucks, and it damns them either way, because this contract is really, really hurting the Canucks and their spending power. $2.5 million is just enough money where it's like, yeah, we can't really afford to have $2.5 million of dead cap on our roster, but it's just small enough that, hey, we can LTIR it, but what can we get with $2.5 million of LTIR space? Tyler Toffoli costs 4 point something, Jake Guentzel was in the $6 million range. And at the same time, this isn't really like a, oh, screw Jim Benning kind of thing, you know? Jim Benning sucks and we all hate. No, it's not like that. It's not. And the reason it's not is because Jim Benning, well, he did sign the Tucker Poolman contract. Nobody could have predicted that the guy could have gotten hurt. He got migraines and concussions in the ways that he did, and it's like, you can't help but feel bad for everybody involved here. Like, I'm not gonna say that Tucker Poolman was the best defenseman in the world. If you had to twist my arm, I'd say that pretty much what we're getting out of Carson Soucy is pretty much what we wanted out of Tucker Poolman, I would say. But when it comes to health-related injuries and concussions, you cannot control that. So ultimately, this is very unfortunate, but what can you do? Like, the Canucks tried to trade this money away. They couldn't. $2.5 million on the LTIR, again, it's not enough to really give you significant LTIR maneuvering room, but it's just big enough where it's like you can't really afford to have that on your roster and thus be below the salary cap to make trades. Mark Stone in Vegas is a prime example of how the LTIR works well, because lacerated spleen, whatever the thing is that he got, that guy's making $9 million bucks. So you see what the Vegas Golden Knights are able to do with 9 million extra buckaroos on their dollar amount LTIR usage space. Anthony Mantha, Tomas Hertl, they get all the big fish every single year. Because guys like Eichel and guys like Stone and guys like Shea Theodore going on the LTIR gives them a huge amount of playroom to work with. Tucker Poolman and his $2.5 million AAV salary does not. But it's not cheap enough that you can keep it on the roster. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about the Vancouver Canucks trade deadline acquisitions, or lack thereof. Once again, what are your thoughts on the fact that the Canucks did nothing at the deadline? Do you think Tucker Poolman and his contract was the ultimate dagger? Do you think there's anything else at play? Because realistically, like, how else were the Canucks not going to be able to justify matching a second and a third for Tyler Toffoli? They could have done that easy. Like, I'm sorry, but that price is so cheap. That's cheaper than what they got it for last time. Like, Tyler Madden, Tim Schaller, a draft pick. My gosh, dude. Like, the Canucks realistically could have gotten Tyler Toffoli had there just been a little bit more flexibility with the salary cap room. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as to whether or not you buy this idea that because Tucker Poolman's LTIR salary is the way it is, the Vancouver Canucks really were hampered in terms of their salary cap flexibility heading into the trade deadline. He's the only LTIR guy they have. Everybody else is either on the regular IR or dead cap like the buyout for OEL. So, realistically, there's nothing else the Canucks could have done. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as to how everything has gone down, and do you think it actually is possible for the Canucks to trade away Tucker Poolman and his contract? For what it's worth, the contract does expire at the end of 24-25, so all we got to do is deal with this for one more year, but are you willing to wait 2 years before the Vancouver Canucks are really able to make things work and be LTIR free, assuming, of course, knock on wood, everybody stays healthy for the next few years and beyond? But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about the Canucks. The article that we pulled from, there's a lot more stuff written in it about the Canucks and their trade deadline period, so I'll leave a link in the description if you want to read that yourself. It's a good piece from PJ. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about this entire Canucks conversation on trades. I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye.